So I'm going to start my talk today. I'm going to talk about what I call big boys' bedrooms and arrested development. And I want to start with this guy. We tend to hear today that men are under attack, that masculinity is in crisis, that boys are falling apart or behind and girls are getting ahead. And sometimes also that feminism has gone too far. And these kind of sentiments, we've heard them for about 150 years or so, but perhaps they're more prevalent today than ever. And the current poster boy of what I would call the boys' crisis is this man, the notorious Canadian psychology professor, Jordan B. Peterson. On several occasions, he has pointed out that young men should clean up their bedrooms and make their beds. So let's hear how it's...
You know, what are the processes? Well, I think what I've recommended to people is clean up your room. That's a good start. Organize your local landscape. Schedule your time. Start taking control of yourself.
So clean up your room. So instead of getting involved in political activism, Peterson encourages people, young people, and particularly young men, to take responsibility for themselves, and sort of that will be portrayed through cleaning up their bedrooms. So that would be the first step to change, and particularly to take charge of your life and stop whining and complaining about structural inequalities. He says in a podcast, he says, don't be fixing up the economy, 18-year-olds. You don't know anything about the economy. It's a massive, complex machine beyond anyone's understanding, and you mess with it at peril. So can you even clean up your own room? No. Well, you think about that. You should think about that, because if you can't even clean up your own room, who the hell are you to give advice to the world? So tonight I want to talk to you about boys' bedrooms and what seems to be the threat of the untidy beds in our cultures, because I don't think Peterson is the only one who's obsessed with boys' bedrooms, but that boys' bedrooms have become a place filled with anxiety. It's pivotal to current concerns about the problems with boys, and these no matter if they come from or are raised by conservative perspectives like Peterson in this case, or from a more feminist or leftist perspective. In the bedrooms, what we hear is that boys play video games, they watch porn, they grow fat, they spread online hate and sexism. They don't socialize, and they avoid taking responsibility for themselves and for the world. So we'll give you 3 examples from film and TV of what I would call the big boys' bedrooms. That is, when adult men stay or return to the boy room. And as you will see, the big boys' bedrooms sort of epitomize masculine immaturity and contemporary concerns about masculinity as being in a state of arrested development, and how this may end up in violence. The US film scholar David Graven has argued that the bromance movies, or beta male movies, and comedies are, quote, the primary means where contemporary crisis of masculinity can be explored, and particularly the call to remasculinization. And the basic story in these kind of films is that the adult man needs to develop. He has to stop being childish and instead become a grown-up, heterosexual, monogamous man that takes full family responsibility. And I would say that the quintessential beta male movie is the 40-Year-Old Virgin from 2005 by Judd Apatow. And in that one, we find Andy, played by Stephen Carell, that you see here. He's a stock supervisor at an electronics store, and he's also a toy hobbyist whose friends resolve to help him lose his virginity. Andy's portrayed as being in sort of an arrested development. He lives in his own apartment, but his apartment has become sort of a big boy's room, completely dedicated to his childish hobbies. He collects toys, he plays video games, and he reads comic books.
I have a very fulfilling life.
And now I am making your silver pants blue.
That's some, Roadburn. Come on. Come on, sucker!
Now, pretty ladies around the world got a weird thing to show you.
So, leaving the big boy's bedroom, and that I would say that film, one of the storylines is about that Andy leaves his bedroom and actually sells his toys. That is also part of the plot of a Swedish film called The Wedding Photographer, Bröllopsfotografen by Ulf Malmros, where we find Robin, who's 29 years old. He lives in a mill town in rural Värmland, and he still lives with his parents and works at the factory where his father is the manager. And when his best friend Bobby asks him why he doesn't move out, Robin answers, "Why? I'm not ashamed. I have my own entrance, we have separate finances, and I have my own fridge." So at the same time, he's actually thinking about moving from home and getting an apartment just a few blocks away from his parents. But what happens is that the factory closes and he's fired. Then he takes a quick loan and he decides to buy an expensive camera and move to Stockholm to try to make it as a photographer. I would say that The Wedding Photographer tells the story about class mobility while also narrating the journey from the rural periphery and the outmoded rural town to the urban progressive center, from the mill town to the upper class neighborhood Djursholm. And the morale of the film is also the necessity of moving out of your parental home and your boy room to get a job, to become an adult, to be able to have heterosexual relations. So Robin goes from being an unemployed single heavy metal fan with long hair to having his hair cut and getting a job and a career and a girlfriend. My last example revolves around an adult man moving back to his parental home. In the first season of the Swedish TV series, The Bonusfamiljen, by Felix Herngren and others, we follow the newly divorced Martin, who tries to buy a new apartment. But since he has a low-income job, a record of non-payment, and is also unable to get a creditor, he's forced to move to his back to his childhood home, to his mother, with his two kids, and they stay in the attic that you will see here on the photo. So he attempts to create a family space, but the situation is very much portrayed as the ultimate failure, as a father not being able to support your kids and to make a proper post-nuclear family home, so to speak. So these three examples illustrate the normative expectations around men and boys' bedrooms, I would say. While the bedroom is a place of identity making in childhood and teenage years, it's a place that you have to leave and never return to. Because if you stay, or if you make a boy room, so to speak, out of your apartment, or if you move back to your parents, you have utterly failed in your heterosexual masculinity. You have diverted too much from the straight lifeline a normative life course. You're sort of in a state of arrested development and you will be cast into ridicule. A grown-up man in a boy's room is an anachronism, a person that, like Peter Pan, is stuck in the wrong time and place. But apart from mockery and laughter, what is the problem with the big boys' bedrooms? Let me end this talk with this picture. Together with Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch, which was recently depicted in the Leaving Neverland documentary, I would argue that this room is actually one of the most monstrous versions of the big boys' bedrooms, or our concerns about the big boys' bedrooms. I don't know if anybody could guess what kind of bedroom this is, but it's the room of the Norwegian white supremacist terrorist Anders Behring Breivik. In her study of popular science and newspaper texts about Breivik, gender studies scholar Mia Eriksson has shown that the central theme in the story about Breivik was, and in order to understand his attacks, revolved around that he moved back home to his mom. He locked himself up in his old boy's room and played Counter-Strike to prepare himself for the murders. So he was described as a mama's boy, too close and too attached to his mother. He had issues communicating with women. He was also recurrently portrayed as asexual and effeminate. So making sense of Breivik revolved partially around his arrested development, which is illustrated through him moving back home to his boy room. For instance, in Expressen, the Swedish daily, says that here is Anders Breivik's boy room, where they presented this picture where he planned his terror attacks. And Aftonbladet says, in the messy room, besides a bed, a desk with computer and a stereo, there was a safe where the police found 68 cartridges for a shotgun and 20,000 in cash. And finally, the Telegraph said, Norway killer, Anders Behring Breivik was a mommy's boy. So this is, I would argue, the grotesque, dreadful version of our current cultural anxiety around our boys and the bedroom cultures and the crisis of masculinity. Thank you.